beginning with verse 1. Then Jesus told them a parable about their need to pray always and not to lose heart. He said, "In a certain city there was a judge who neither feared God nor had respect for people. In that city there was a widow who kept coming to him and saying, 'Grant me justice against my opponent.' For a while he refused. But later he said to himself, 'Though I have no fear of God and no respect for anyone, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will grant her justice, so that she may not wear me out by continually coming.' And the Lord said, 'Listen to what the unjust judge says. And will not God grant justice to his chosen ones who cry to him day and night? Will he delay long in helping them? I tell you, he will quickly grant justice to them. And yet when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth?'" The Gospel of the Lord. You may be seated. Praying for justice is the theme for this day's sermon. I'll start the sermon reflecting on this teaching from Jesus on prayer, and then Jessica will give some application of the text on the topic of justice as she updates us on our ELCA malaria campaign, and then talks about that country in southern Africa of Zambia, because Zambia will be the focus, the international focus for us next month with our Gifts of Hope. You read that article in the newsletter today. Luke 18, verse 1. Then Jesus told them a parable about their need to pray always and not to lose heart. Jesus teaches us we have a need to pray. We need to pray always and that we do not lose heart. The Message translation puts it this way. Jesus told them a story showing that it is necessary for them to pray consistently and never quit. His point is we have a need to pray to God, to pray continually, to not get down or lose heart or get discouraged. For our God is like a perfect, loving parent, always ready to listen, always ready to care. I believe hurting when we hurt, and so thankful when our prayers and our actions are for the sake of others who need God's care, who need God's justice. And today we'll focus especially on our ELCA malaria campaign. When it comes to constant prayer and not giving up, I think about so many of you in our congregation who have gone through so much. Michael Feltner gave us permission to share his email from this past Thursday. I'll just read portions of it. Some of you know Michael Feltner and his family. He teaches at his administration at Pepperdine. But Michael writes, "I'm very excited to share that I completed my 12th and final chemo treatment today. God willing, Mr. Hodgkins has been eradicated from my life. I cannot begin to express my gratitude and appreciation for all the well wishes, thoughts, and prayers that have been offered to me." And he goes on with that kind of, well, I'll say one more sentence. While I've never expected cancer to be part of my life, the past 8 months have been a blessing. It has been a blessing and challenging at times, but I've also learned a great deal about myself, my faith, dealing with difficulties, and the power of both prayer and a positive attitude. So he thanks you for your prayers. And one other just quick comment about Bill Munn, our sound man, one of our sound guys, our lead sound guy. Well, just Friday afternoon, had a stent put in the main artery to his heart. And here he is up in the balcony last night and this morning. So continued prayers for Bill and his well-being. Some of you have seen the movie Gravity with Sandra Bullock and George Clooney. Anybody seen it yet? Okay. In that kind of movie about life and death stories, there's a lot of faith questions. Some of them are more implicit than explicit, but I'll give you one quote from Sandra Bullock's character that won't be a spoiler for you if you haven't seen the movie. But as the two of them are out there floating in space, wondering if they will survive, Sandra tells George, "No one ever taught me how to pray." A powerful point in the movie. Who has taught you how to pray? And who are you teaching how to pray? A friend from Wisconsin posted a fun Facebook story. She and her family were in a restaurant and they prayed together before a meal. And a man at the table next to them said, "Excuse the interruption, but I wanted to tell you that when my wife and I observe someone or observe others in a restaurant praying, we buy their meals." My friend Lois commented, "I guess it pays to pray." At different times in our lives, we may have many questions and issues about prayer. We pray for our health, but there's a spot on the X-ray. We pray for peace, but the troops aren't home yet. We pray for our government, but it seems that divisions grow wider. We may have problems with prayer, but when we go all the way down, our deepest problem with prayer is that we just simply lose heart. We lose confidence that our prayers will be heard and answered. And so Jesus tells us this parable that we might always pray and not lose heart. The story that Jesus told his disciples tells us is about an absolutely horrible judge. The judge hated people and he hated God. Unfortunately, appearing in his courtroom was a poor widow who needed justice but had nothing. She had absolutely nothing. No money, no husband. She had no standing. She had no power. She had no resources. She had nothing. Well, she did have one thing. What was it? She had the gift of persistence. And when you only have one weapon, you use it. And so she annoyed that judge constantly. Finally, she wore the old judge down in verse 5 when he talks about her wearing him out. That verb literally means to strike under the eye or to give a black eye. So the judge says to himself, "You know, I don't even care about justice. I don't care about this widow. I don't like people. I don't like God. I really don't like anybody very much. But this woman is about to drive me crazy. I'm going to give her what she wants just to get her off my back." Well, that's the story Jesus tells us about prayer, about not losing heart. And I think as Jesus tells this story, as some of you are doing now, he tells it with a little smile on his lips and a twinkle in his eye. What are we supposed to get out of that story that will help us pray always and not lose heart? Some people say we should focus on the judge. After all, in the text, Jesus does say, "Listen to what the unjust judge says." But if our focus is on the judge, the moral of the story would be, take heart, things are not as bad as they seem. But the moral of the story is, pray always and do not lose heart. Okay, maybe Jesus wants us to focus our attention on the poor widow. Did you notice how she went after what she needed? It was, after all, her persistence managed to wrangle justice from the unjust judge. But that's not all of it. If that were the whole meaning of Jesus' story, then the moral of the story would be feisty and pray always. But the moral of the story is pray always and do not lose heart. No, Jesus' story is not finally about a bad judge or a poor widow. It's finally a story about God, about God's passion for justice, and about you and me and our prayers. The story says, if a poor widow without standing can wrangle justice out of a judge without honor, how much more will you, God's own child, the one whom God formed in your mother's womb, the God who has loved you from the very beginning, find a God who will hear and answer our prayers? Someone posted a great quote by Max Lucado that really has meant a lot to me. And he wrote, "Our prayers may be awkward, our attempts may be feeble, but since the power of prayer is in the one who hears it and not in the one who says it, our prayers do make a difference. Our prayers for justice and life and health and well-being do make a difference in our world through the ELCA malaria campaign. They're making a huge difference, as you're going to hear and see from Jessica now. Thank you, Jessica, for being with us this weekend.